Okay, I am very privileged this morning to be interviewing Laura Amador. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did, Nancy. Thank you.
She's a marriage coach, that the lady after my own heart. She doesn't just believe that troubled marriages can be saved, she knows they can by empowering women in particular. And we're going to hear a lot more about that in the next few minutes. There was so much of great value in the article that you published in Authority Magazine. It was hard for me to pick out certain things that I'd like to emphasize this morning. So many women and men feel lonely and unappreciated in their marriage. I understand that's where you were to begin with. That's where your journey began.
Yes, yes, that's right.
And you took responsibility for finding a solution by treating your marriage like a research project. What prompted you to do that?
Well, I have approached most of my life that way. I suppose it's because I like to believe that there's a solution to everything. And so I opened up my computer and for years just scoured through the internet looking for answers. And at first, the first few years, that really did not serve me well. There is so much conflicting advice. I didn't really know how to apply it. And so I ended up getting myself into trouble quite a bit. But I'm glad that I did that. I'm glad that I was hopeful because that was the only way I ended up actually finding answers and finding something that did end up helping.
What I love about that is you took the initiative to do the research because you believed there were answers. You just needed to find the right answers. So often when we human beings are unhappy, we blame the person that we're in relationship with for our unhappiness rather than assuming responsibility. I just love that about you. I really respect and admire that about you. So one of the myths that you listed in the Authority magazine is that a marriage cannot be healed unless both persons are working on it. Want to just kind of explore that thought a little bit more?
Sure. Thank you, Nancy. Yes. Well, as I mentioned, those first few years of just reading blogs, articles, books, and forums, especially, the message that I encountered time and time again was if your partner is not willing to work on things with you, then there's no hope. Cut ties, move on. That's all there is. And that was really heartbreaking. And I just really thought there must be another way. I can't be the only person on this earth who really wants to find a way to make this work and to see if it's possible. I thought those can't be my only two options, to stay and be miserable or to leave. That's really all there is.
Yeah.
And so as I was looking and looking, that was when I finally stumbled upon the book that I later mentioned in the article, The Empowered Wife by Laura Doyle. And what was so it really spoke to me because it was all about empowering me and bringing my focus back to my place of power, which is me. I could not force my husband to do anything and I couldn't drag him. And not that my husband is was unwilling or that he's a bad guy or anything like that. It was just that I really struggled to get him to do what I want. I wanted to control him. I wanted to be married to myself, essentially.
Yeah.
And he's a very different person than I am. And so we really struggled to get on the same page. And I took every time that he wasn't on the same page as me, I took that as a personal affront rather than it being what it really is, which is that he's his own person.
Yeah.
And I needed to learn to not only be okay with that, but to thrive with that. And that's really what this was all about.
And, the mistakes that you made in the beginning of trying to control him, that's a mistake that so many women make. Like, if I can just make him different, then I will be happy.
Exactly.
It doesn't work, does it?
All it did was make me miserable. Yes.
And him probably.
Oh, I'm sure, because he was spending a lot of time at work or on his phone,
Yeah,
avoiding me, which just fed that cycle of pain and loneliness.
yes. So you mentioned that what women like to do is communicate, and we like to communicate what we're unhappy about. And it turns into a list of grievances that create greater distance in the relationship rather than the closeness that we crave. It's
Mhm.
like the things that we intuitively or instinctively do as women backfire on us, but we blame our partners rather than realizing that it's the skill or the technique we're using that isn't working.
Right, exactly. So I would, for example, go out to lunch with my girlfriends and talk to them about everything that my husband wasn't doing right.
Yes.
And of course, they're my girlfriends and they love me, so they would validate my feelings. And so then I'd come home ready to tell him everything I had told them.
Yes.
And thinking that was a big step because I was going to be honest and authentic
Yes.
and but all that ended up doing was I was hoping that or expecting that he would connect the dots and take my list of complaints and know exactly what to do with that to make me happy. And really, what I learned is it was really my responsibility first to create my own happiness. And then instead of bringing a list of complaints, being able to focus on, okay, what is going well, or what do I want to experience? And being able to bring that to the table and share that vulnerably, that ended up being such a much more powerful, effective, but not just that, really compassionate and kind and respectful way to communicate. And he responded to that so much better than he ever did to my list of complaints.
In uh, my late marriage, my husband has passed, but in the first few years when we were struggling, I just I I thought that, he was a very brilliant man in his field and a very naturally compassionate man, but I just thought maybe he was stupid because he just didn't get what I was trying to tell him. And later, when we found an effective coach and we learned to communicate respectfully, I discovered that when I delivered a message with respect, he could hear it.
Yes.
And in my practice, my coaching practice, which now is I've been doing for almost 30 years, I call respect the fertilizer of love.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful and so true.
Because without respect, love shrivels up and eventually dies.
Mhm.
So you mentioned you really emphasize the importance of self-care. So tell us what you do to take care of yourself.
Sure. Yes. Oh, I love talking about self-care because self-care is really just the act of self-love and of honing and really developing self-worth. My And I had no idea that this was something that I was really missing before. But in retrospect, I can really pinpoint that many of the grievances that I had in my relationship were stemming from my lack of self-confidence and self-worth
Yeah.
because I wanted my husband to make me feel worthy. I wanted him to fill that gap where I didn't value myself all that much. And to give a few examples, I knew what it was to respect a girlfriend, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I had no idea what it was to respect my husband, but that's a whole other topic. I had no idea how to respect myself. And so, for example, I would say, well, this afternoon, I'm going to sit down and relax and read my book. And then if my husband called and asked me to run to the store to pick up something for him, then I would end up saying, okay, I'll do it, and then not keep that promise to myself. And then what would end up happening was then I would feel resentful.
Yeah.
And so much of not taking care of myself, not keeping those promises to myself, every time I broke a promise to myself, I was chipping away at the feeling of self-respect and the feelings of self-worth. Because why was I able to keep a promise to everyone else? I would keep a promise to my boss. If I said I was going to arrive at a certain hour, I'd get there at that hour. I kept promises to everyone else in my life, but I couldn't seem to keep them for myself. And that was really that I was communicating to myself that I wasn't worthy of that I wasn't valuable.
Yeah.
And I was, because I had not really recognized that that was my own responsibility to cultivate, I was putting my frustration that I didn't feel valuable onto my husband and blaming him for that.
Yeah.
And so all these little things that he was doing, for example, he would leave his boots at the front door every day. And I'd say, how, it's not that hard, just put them on the rack. And
Mhm.
it sounds so benign, but the truth is, I would get angry
Mhm.
and frustrated and think, well, he doesn't care. I've asked him a million times. If he can't do this for me, he must not care about me.
Yes.
Why can't he prioritize my feelings and my needs?
Yeah.
It became this whole thing. Of course, it wasn't really about the boots. It was about me not feeling important and valuable. And so really we hear about self-care all the time, but really it's so much more than just this fluffy fun although of course it is about that as well, but it goes so much deeper. It's about being able to cultivate that feeling of self-worth so that I don't need anyone else to make me feel that way because I've already done that for myself.
I believe that whenever we don't uphold reasonable, authentic boundaries, not only for others, but for ourselves, the result is resentment. It's like a predictable outcome if we're not keeping promises to ourselves or to others. So, so what are you used one example of keeping a promise to yourself to spend the afternoon reading your book. Are there other ways that you cultivated self-worth and self-care?
Yes, that's right. That was the question at heart. So that's really how I see self-care in general, is just being able to keep my word to myself. That's the essence of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I love to spend time in nature. I have three little children, so just having them play while I listen to an audiobook. For me, self-care doesn't have to be luxury, though it could be. It doesn't
Uh-huh.
have to cost a penny, though it could.
Yeah.
It's just whatever's going to ground me in the present moment. And so for me, that's having a delicious and nutritious breakfast, which is a new one for me. I used to just skip breakfast all the time. Anything that feels really loving to me and that puts me in a great mood and that helps me show up as my best self for my children, for my husband, and for me, of course, because then I get to feel good and proud about the way that I am showing up in the world. Uh, yeah, but it comes down to people for me, nature, inner peace, finding that inner peace.
I think you know, being able to nurture ourselves, especially, well, not only in a marriage, but when you've got three small children who all need your nurturing nature, it's it's very challenging to set aside those events or times or actions that fill my cup so that I'm nurturing those around me from an overflowing cup instead of an empty one.
That's right.
You mentioned a couple of times in your article, I love that you mentioned the role of really deep appreciation in the healing of your marriage. And you made the comment, whatever we notice the most grows. And
Mm-hmm.
that's true. If we notice it negatively, it gets worse. If we notice
Yeah.
it positively, it gets better. And you mentioned gratitude as being a very key component to the healing of your marriage. So expand a little bit on that thought.
Sure. Well, I say that gratitude is really what helped me heal the relationship and then mold it into the one that it is today. Because exactly as you said, it comes down to that confirmation bias. So if I were to say there's so many red cars, I might not have noticed them yesterday, but you better bet I'll notice them today, right? And I was so focused back in those battle days in my marriage on all of the bad things that was all I could see. That was all I could see. And so I was missing completely all of the wonderful things that my husband was contributing to my life and to our relationship.
Yes.
And so shifting that focus, at first, I had a lot of resistance to this. And I do encounter this sometimes with other women as well, because I felt like, well, am I just supposed to brainwash myself and forget about the bad
Yes.
things?
Yes.
But really, what was my experience was that by focusing on the beautiful and wonderful things that were happening, then the negative things started to decrease
Mm-hmm.
and the positive things started to increase.
Mm-hmm.
And this really came down to knowing, having self knowledge, knowing within myself what it is that I really do appreciate and how I feel best loved, and being able to share that with my husband through appreciation.
Yes.
So, for example, if uh, my little children, for example, my husband, this was the first time I remember it very well. He was out in the garden with the kids and he told my daughter, "Why don't you pick some flowers for mommy?" And so she picked a bunch of dandelions and she brought them to me.
Yeah.
And so later that day, with my little cup of dandelions in the middle of the kitchen table, I said to my husband, "Oh, that was so sweet of you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I felt so loved." And the
Mm-hmm.
very next day, he brought home a bouquet of roses. And that's since become a weekly routine. He brings me
Yeah.
flowers every week.
Yes.
And that's what I mean by the power of gratitude and focusing on what's going well.
Gratitude took a little different form for me in my first marriage. My first husband died very young. We only had 4.5 years together. But the first 2 years I spent complaining and trying to control him. And then I had kind of a spiritual awakening and decided that to begin being grateful for every minute I had with him rather than complaining about how much he worked and how little attention I was getting. And so I began what I call a spiritual practice of every night when I saw his truck come in the driveway, I would say a prayer of gratitude. Thank you that he's home. Thank you that he's safe. Thank you that he comes home. And so he began walking in the door every night to a woman that was full of gratitude. Even though I didn't know at that time to express appreciation and gratitude to him, his behavior changed. You know,
Wow.
it made it a transformative difference in the last 2 years that we had together. And when he died unexpectedly, my first thought was, I'm so glad that I made that change because we had, the last 2 years we had together were so much happier than the first 2 years. So appreciation, whether it's person to person or just an attitude of gratitude, can make an enormous difference in the relationship. So,
Oh, that's,
thank you for listening to my story there.
oh, that's powerful and beautiful, Nancy. It sounds like gratitude was really a gift for both of you.
And it's been a spiritual practice ever since then. And then later, when I remarried, I learned how powerful it was to express daily appreciation to my husband. That was his primary love language, was words of appreciation. So you mentioned the recovery when trust is violated in a relationship. We tend to think that it makes sense to withhold trust until certain conditions are met.
Right.
But talk a little bit about why that doesn't work.
Sure. Well, we do hear a lot, and it makes sense from the outside, he needs to earn it back. In my experience, trust is a muscle. And the more that I withhold trust, the less likely and the less possible it is for it to strengthen and come back. And so I do believe that trust is a courageous leap of faith.
Yes.
It always is. It always is. It doesn't matter what's happened in anyone's life or relationship. Trust always comes with the risk of, well, it's very vulnerable. It comes with the risk of pain and heartbreak, no matter who we're giving it to and no matter the circumstance. And I have a lot of empathy and compassion because I understand that when trust has been broken, it can be terrifying to give it again.
Yes.
However, what I've really seen is that if that has been the choice to try to save the marriage, to try to heal the trust, that withholding it until those circumstances are met, which are so elusive, because it changes from day to day is what I see time and time again, because again, it comes down to what someone's feeling on the inside. And then it really creates this dynamic where one person feels like they're being scrutinized all the time and controlled and being looked at as if they have negative intentions, which is not conducive to any kind of connection or healing.
Right.
While the other person feels like they're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're waiting for heartbreak to happen again.
Yes.
And so I really believe that if that choice has been made to heal the trust, to move forward and to save the relationship, then that's what there is just to take that courageous choice and choose to trust again. And what that looks like is treating the relationship and treating that person as though you do trust them.
Yes. Which is, as you said, it can be a big risk and it requires a great deal of courage.
Yes.
You mentioned, or your statement was, the foundation of a thriving marriage lies in respectful, grateful communication, accountability, and personal growth by example.
Yeah.
So can you expound on that a little bit?
Of course. Well, it comes down to the very simple truth that I have no control over anybody except for myself. As much as I would love to be able to control my husband, I just can't. Or at times I was under the impression that I could because he would listen, but it came at a very high cost. And that cost was the connection between us.
Yes.
And I really had to ask myself, is that a price I'm willing to pay? And if I was, then what was the whole point?
And what we long for, I believe, more than anything, is that safe connection, that the feeling of being in a relationship where I am loved and supported and I'm safe, and the connection is broken by these things that you're talking about this morning, that it's almost as though we try to create a connection using tools that are faulty, that don't give us the results we want. I'm wondering, in your coaching experience, the effect of the transformation of a marriage on the children in a marriage.
Oh, I love this question because it's one of the key reasons why I was so committed to transforming my own relationship, and now why I love to do what I do. Because at the end of the day, the children are hugely impacted by what they see and the environment that they grow up in. And of course, how the husband and wife interact with each other is going to mold the environment. Because if there is a light, fun, and loving environment, then the children will feel emotionally safe.
Yes.
And on the other hand, if there is arguing, tension, if the kids don't quite know what to expect from day to day, not only are they missing out on having that example of what a healthy relationship should look like, which is essentially what molds our own relationships later in life, but it also can create so much anxiety and fear for them. And I know that so many children, unfortunately, do grow up in that way.
So with your clients, have you witnessed or had reported to you the improvement in the behavior of the children when the marriage becomes more stable?
Absolutely. And all ages of children, from tiny, tiny to young adults. In fact, I had one client who, for religious purposes, divorce was not an option, but she was absolutely miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And she, the breaking point, the turning point for her, the darkest moment was actually when her teenage daughter went to the school counselor for help and just broke down crying because of all of the tension between her parents.
Mm-hmm.
And the counselor called her. And when she received this message, she was just heartbroken and realized we can't go forward like this anymore. And that was when she finally reached out for help. And when she saw what a toll this was taking on her children. And about a year later, she said that her kids were completely different kids because the environment was
Yes.
completely different. The
Yeah.
bickering between them had massively decreased. The disrespect was replaced by respect and gratitude towards the parents, towards each other. The whole culture of the home changed. And it's incredible, really, what one single person, and especially the woman who in so many ways is the center of the family and the center of the home and the center of community,
Mm-hmm.
we are powerful, us
Yes,
women.
we are. We are. I love that your emphasis is on empowering women. We have so much more power than we recognize, and when we're using that power to try to control someone else and make them change and it backfires, we don't it often takes a crisis. In fact, my newsletter that went out this week is about the benefits of crisis, that many times it takes a crisis for us to be willing to make positive changes. Positive changes are not always obvious when we're in the middle of a mess. I remember when Jim and I were struggling so much with our marriage, I just remember thinking the universe is an orderly place. You know, there are laws that, like gravity, that we can count on. There must be laws for marriage, for human relationships. And if I understood them, I would follow those laws because I want the results of a happy, loving marriage.
Yes.
And fortunately, we found someone that taught us. In our case, it was how to communicate respectfully and how to manage anger with respect rather than using anger as an excuse to attack
Mm.
each other. Is there anything else you would like to add to this talk that we're having that would be of benefit to people that are listening, women in particular?
Sure. I suppose the last thing I would really love to make sure that people take away from this conversation is hope, because I felt for so many years like it was hopeless and I wasn't willing to turn in the towel, but I thought sooner or later I'll have to. And truly, I have seen dozens and dozens and dozens, and in fact, thousands of women who have used these skills have been able to single-handedly really recreate a whole new culture and dynamic within their relationship. Because as we said, women, we really are powerful. And I think that we don't get that message quite enough. We really can set the tone in our relationship if we know how to do it. And I felt so powerless for so long. So I hope if there's one thing they take away from this, that it's that.
It's so interesting you would use the word hope, because at the beginning of your article in Authority Magazine that I reread before talking to you this morning, I wrote the word hope in big letters, that was the sum total of what I was getting from all that you shared, was just a huge big dose of hope.
Mm.
This has been so exciting for me to meet you, and also to hear about the six, tell me what it is, the six.
The 6 intimacy skills.
Say that again.
Oh, of course, the 6 intimacy skills.
Six intimacy skills.
Yes.
I had not ever heard about that work before, and I'm so excited to know about it, and so thrilled to hear about the work you're doing. Is there anything at all further that I can do to help you?
Oh, thank you so much, Nancy. Well, no, I think I would just say thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been such a pleasant pleasure. And the questions were so thoughtful. I love to really just sift through and think about my own experience and the experience of the women that I've had the honor of encountering. And yeah, I think that just really getting the word out there that yes, it is possible, because I know there's so many women like me who wonder, is this all that I was dealt?
Yes.
Is real true love and happiness not in the cards for me?
Yeah.
And I believe that everyone deserves that.
Where are you located, Laura?
In Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
Yes.
And how can someone get in touch with you if they want to?
Oh, sure. Well, my website is coachlauraamador.com. I do have a blog there, and I write a weekly newsletter with tips and experiences, advice. And I'm also quite active on Instagram, which is _Laura Amador.
And spell Amador for those that are listening.
Oh, sure. It's A, M like Mary, A, D like dog, O-R. And I
Okay.
should I should also mention that I created a guide with myself in mind. Honestly, I was thinking back to what are the 5 things I wish I knew back when I was in the darkest days in my own marriage. And so I gathered those 5 things and created a guide called 5 Steps to Reignite Connection in Your Marriage. So if
That
someone
gives me
is,
goosebumps.
oh, well, yes, if someone is hoping to learn these skills and strategies and start experimenting with them, I think that would be the perfect place to start. And that's on my website, coachlauraamador.com.
I'm so excited that people who are hearing this and who perhaps have read your article on Authority Magazine are getting a huge dose of hope, and also can go to your website, Laura, coachlauraamador.com. Is that
That's right.
correct?
Yes, that's right.
To take advantage of the resources you're offering. Thank you so much for the work you do. I'm so excited to know about it, and it was my privilege to get to know you a little bit better face to face this morning.
Thank you so much, Nancy. This is so lovely to chat with you.
Well, maybe someday we'll be in touch again, but until then, bless you for the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. Thank you so much.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.